Okay, I'm gonna give you a few tips on how to use the back extension and how to effectively target your hamstrings and then change it to target your glutes. So, Q-tips if you're going to focus on hamstrings. Into a position, feet want to be fairly neutral, not turned in, not turned out. Make sure your heels are nicely locked up into the back and your feet are as flat and you've got a little bit of gravitas with that. In terms of the setup, you want the top of this to be just through on portion of your hips, just below your hip crease. To make it harder, you can have a little bit lower. So effectively this, if I had the knees in position, will be going through almost similar to a glute ham raise. But here, we're just focusing on the hamstrings, so let's just make it a slightly easier option. You're gonna raise it up a little bit. So in this position, when I lay forward, you can see the pad is just below my hip crease. Now, the main cue points on through here are keeping thoracic extension, bending through the hips, and when you're heading down, I normally prefer to have a slight bend in my knee. You can keep it fairly straight, but a slight bend in my knee, it just better engages the hamstrings. When you drop down, your emphasis is not to flex through here. You want to keep a fairly neutral spine, because what you're trying to do is lengthen your hamstrings as much as possible. So when I go down, keep them back up, trying to get as much stretch in the hamstrings as possible. And from this part, I'm literally going to focus on engaging hamstrings first, pulling back, and then raising through. You don't need to hyperextend, no need to come up too fast, but the main focus is on drawing down, full stretch of the hamstrings, and then coming up through. Now, transition this through to a little bit more focus on the glutes. You're gonna have a very similar setup, but I'd probably suggest to bring this down one, and through here, you wanna turn your toes out, okay? So in this position, a little bit different with the setup, because you're gonna tuck your chin in, and you're gonna bring your thoracic extension down. So when you drop down, you're over curved, and in that position, you're actually gonna try and squeeze through the glutes to enable that position to work. Again, locking in through, toes turned out. In this position, focusing on the glutes and drawing up through. And when you get into that position, you're almost trying to draw up like you would focus on coming through a hip thrust, okay? That is gonna get still hamstrings, but it's also gonna bring in glutes into the equation as well. And try and focus on glutes. You can on this machine also do single leg work. Same thing, the same parameters change, the same setup applies whether you're doing glutes or hamstring focus on a single leg, but if you really want to isolate, I'll drop it into a single leg, lock in, take your other leg just above, so you've got a slight stabilization, and you're just focusing on that single leg hip extension through here. Really bites deep. If you find you could do multiple double-legged hip extensions, back extensions, try the single legged and it will fry.